Andonian. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Andonian's friends have described his flying in a very simple manner. He flew anywhere, in anything with wings, anytime. He began his career during World War II with the ferrying division of the Air Transport Command, flying most of the Army Air Force aircraft types in 1944 and early 1945. A graduate of the Empire Test Pilot School, he was assigned to the Air Force Test Center at Edwards Air Force Base, where he served as Chief of the Special Projects Operations Branch, U-2 Test, until June 1966. He served as an F-4 Squadron Commander in Vietnam, accumulating nearly 300 combat flying hours. Colonel Andonian was later assigned to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where he retired in 1971. As a project pilot, he conducted 340 flights on the U-2A, B, D for classified development testing, and was also project pilot on the U-2C, conducting flight test evaluations. A fellow of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots, Colonel Andonian has logged more than 26,000 flying hours in over 200 types of aircraft and has been honored as the FAA's Master Pilot Award and inducted into the Flight Test Historical Foundation's Gathering of Eagles. Major General Eichhorn will present Colonel Andonian with his medallion.
See if I've got some notes here. First of all, I'd like to emphasize how important it is to have family support. And I've been fortunate enough to have a great family in support of all my activities. In fact, a good many of them came to this function. And even as late as last night, my daughter, who was living and performing an opera over in Cologne, Germany, made it here last night. Andrea? Then I have a few that came in here from Georgia. Gary, my oldest son. Keith, my young son, and his wife, Kathy. Stacy, my youngest daughter, who was born at Edwards Air Force Base. and Leslie, all the way in from Melbourne, Florida. I could talk all night about the things that we've accomplished in the flight test business, but let me just skim over some of the things that I was involved in. First of all, when I completed the test pilot school, before I did actually, some of the Edwards contingent came over to Europe to fly some of the foreign airplanes. In the process, they stopped by Farnborough where I was going through the school. I knew then I was going to be assigned to Edwards, and I was told that I would be getting in on a B-52H program. I was qualified in the B-52. So anyway, when I finally got to Edwards Air Force Base and checked in, I was told they had a crash, a U-2 had crashed and somebody had been killed. And I don't know if they were scraping around to put another pilot in on the program, but I was elected. And why? Because I had B-47 experience, bicycle landing gear, which the U-2 happens to have. Draw the comparison. The B-47 is a 6-engine bomber. The U-2 is a single-engine airplane. Good comparison, right? Anyway, I got into the program, and on one occasion, we changed the fuel control on an airplane, and I had to test on it. So I got my little pressure suit and climbed in the airplane and proceeded up Owens Valley toward Bishop, California. And around 57,000 feet, engine quit. The fuel control gave up, oil pressure went out at the same time. I'm about 100 and some odd miles north of Edwards. What to do? So, having had a little glider experience and having flown out of Tehachapi, California with gliders, I knew about the Sierra mountain wave. So I got over on the ocean side of the mountain and eased back into the Edwards area. Still had 30,000 feet when I got there. Spiraled on down and finally landed on a lake bed because the wind was too cross for the runway. And my boss, Craig Peterson, met me, first one as I opened my canopy. What the hell kind of an emergency was that? I've been waiting here for 40 minutes for you. Later, when we had a flying safety meeting, Frank Borman, one of our astronaut friends, had been flying an F-104 fighter, and he had some problem with the airplane coming back in from a test. And the engine flamed out, but he was able to relight it and climb a little bit, shut the engine down, climb a little bit, shut the engine down. Anyway, at the flying safety meeting, General Branch, who was our boss at that time, had us come up for our flying safety award. Guess what he gave us? A Zippo lighter. So I have to take myself away from Edwards for this next little story. While I was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, when I came up there from Eglin Air Force Base, one of the programs they gave me was probably the more hazardous one I'd ever been involved in. And this one never got off the ground. We called it the Wingless Wonder. They clipped the wings off from the engines outboard. And early in the program, they found that even with just a little bit of wings left between the fuselage and the engines, the airplane was getting some lift. So they put some 2x4 spoilers on top to keep them on the ground. Anyway, on occasion when I'd go out to do a test, either for a drag chute or brake test, some airplanes would be lined up at the head of the runway waiting to take off. The number one guy, when he saw me coming up, would say, "Tower, if you don't mind, I'd like to wait and let this yellow one get off first." And so if there were anybody else in line, they all said the same thing. And it was probably the most hazardous because we'd have to get up a good head of steam before we popped the chute. And on some occasions, the chute would just tear off. And fortunately, we had 11,000 some odd feet of runway and we could, the airplane stopped. And that worked out fine. The other thing that happened while I was at Wright-Patterson, flying the B-47 extensively, the Strategic Air Command people had been flying the airplane for a couple, 3 years, and on occasion they'd have some bad accidents or incidents, whatever. And this one particular thing was the canopy was coming off the airplane. Now, unfortunately, it killed the crew members, but each time we learned of this event, I'd lower my seat a little bit on my flights. And finally, the dispatch people at the operations, bomber operations, they said, "We know whenever you're flying an airplane because when you taxi by, we can't see you." I'm in my 80s, by the way, and I'll be 86 in February. But I still fly. I own my own airplane, and I've been involved in some flight test work with a friend who runs a shop down in Crestview, Florida. In fact, about 3 years ago, one of my friends in Greenville, Texas, had been working on a home-built airplane. I've flown several of these home-builts for and with people, but they'd already been tested before I got into it. This one individual had a Glass Air. It's a little tail-dragging single-engine airplane. He'd been working on it for 21 years, and he asked me to test fly it for him. So, believe me, it's a little bit more risky than the test work sometimes we do in the military. Anyway, it worked. I'm still here. I want to really personally, I'm so happy that my family is here to help support me for this recognition, but especially the city of Lancaster, city officials, and some of the Performing Arts Center people here. My special thanks to you.